Hello and welcome to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we continue our fantasy football team preview series with the Miami Dolphins. Make sure you check out the previous 18 team previews if you haven't already. They will be rolling up until the week before week one, trying to keep them as evergreen as possible. So without further ado, your 2020 Miami Dolphins fantasy football team preview. First question, who's going to be under center? Seemed like a situation where, if there was going to be a top 10 quarterback that could truly take the season off. I mean, I have my money on Tua. I understand Herbert and Ty God and the whole, not being a bridge QB thing over in LA, but just with the hip injury with Tua, it was almost, made out to be this whole offseason. The dude wasn't going to be 100% for a while, but cleared for all football activities, appears to be competing. We'll see what's what. I mean, top 10 QBs historically get on the field sooner rather than later. Since 2010, 17 of 20 top 10 quarterbacks selected have gone on to start at least 10 games. It's interesting to think about the dynamic in this offense with Fitzpatrick under center versus Tua. I mean, obviously Fitzpatrick was the Dolphins' leading rusher from a season ago and was just, the ultimate kind of YOLO ball fantasy quarterback that, took a lot of people probably to the fantasy championship. I mean, only Lamar Jackson scored more fantasy points than Fitzpatrick upon him taking over the full-time starting job in week 7 last season. And, the offense is suited well for him. We got a bunch of contested catch monsters in DeVante Parker, Preston Williams, and Mike Gesicki. And Fitzpatrick is more than willing to give them a chance. So he's reunited with former OC at both the Jets and the Bills, Chan Gailey. It's a situation where we don't know what we're getting with Tua, but until Burrow's insane 2019 season, Tua was, believed to be the number one quarterback available. So you figure he's going to be able to do his thing to some extent if he's as good as everyone says he will. And we have Fitzpatrick, who is, again, the reigning QB2 from when he was starting last season. So it's tough to, wrap your mind around which one's going to be there because of that. They're both being priced so low in fantasy drafts that they're pretty much going free. And, in a single QB league, okay, you're not touching either of these guys, but Fitzpatrick is going to be a recommended starter whenever he's able to get, that opportunity. I mean, I found myself in a couple best ball leagues where, you're in a 2 QB setup or a super flex and you don't take the QBs when you should have and you get down to the wire. But why would you take, anyone on the Bears or, I would take Tyrod, but, I'm not taking Herbert over these Miami guys. There's something to be said for almost just taking Fitzpatrick and Tua in these best ball formats. And sure, you'll have the Miami quarterback. I understand it kind of limits the upside of the rest of your roster, but clearly, you waited so long to get the quarterback anyway that ideally you have more upside throughout the rest of your skill position than you would have had you taken the quarterback earlier. So, I mean, when Fitzpatrick is going to be out there, he's going to be, on kind of that QB1 borderline in a worst case scenario. I think Tua might be a little bit further away from being, this top 10 fantasy QB, was never, even though he's mobile and, he's rightfully earned some Russell Wilson comps for the things he does, in the off script plays, but, just wasn't a guy that was, consistently racking up rushing yards by any stretch of the imagination at Alabama. I'm high on Fitzpatrick as a streamer option forever how long he can keep the job. I think Tua could have a little more trouble supplying immediate fantasy value if things go to him. The backfield is probably the main spot I'm looking to target in this offense, relative to fantasy costs. It's looking like Jordan Howard as the RB1, Matt Breida as the change of pace pass game RB2. I think that's the best case scenario for Breida, though. I don't have anything against him. I mean, he's a stud. Only Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones have averaged more yards per carry than Breida since 2017 among everyone with at least 300 carries. He's made some plays in the passing game where he's actually functioning as a downfield receiver. Easy to see how he, manages to potentially overtake Howard. But, man, Howard is just one of these guys that coaching staffs love him. And you look at his career, he started off with the John Fox Bears. Then he played a season under Nagy. And then he went to Philly and was good enough to keep Jordan Howard on the bench until he got hurt. And, I mean, that wasn't coaching malpractice. Jordan Howard was playing well last season. He was playing better than Miles Sanders in the first half of the year. Now, I think Sanders, his receiving ability, opens things up. I'm not trying to say I'd rather have Jordan Howard over Miles Sanders on my real life or fantasy team, but I mean, that's 3 different coaching staffs. If you extrapolate what Howard did before the injury last season, 3 separate coaching staffs have given this guy 225 plus touches over the last 4 seasons. So it's one of these spots where the Dolphins brought him on. They didn't add any running backs in the draft. They traded a 5th round pick for Breida. It just seems like Howard is going to be the guy. And what will that guy mean for fantasy and an offense that, Fitzpatrick is the returning leading rusher? Probably not all that great, but hey, the guy's being drafted outside the top 30. I think Jordan Howard is the cheapest fantasy football running back that we can, realistically expect to get 200 plus touches. And it honestly could be a hell of a lot more. And, the Dolphins did do a good job addressing their offensive line throughout free agency and the draft. I have concerns about how quickly they will be able to gel, but we always talk about it. Volume trumps talent in fantasy football. And it looks like Jordan Howard is going to have all the volume he can handle. So I am taking him ahead of Breida. I don't mind taking a dart on Breida. I'm not convinced he's going to get this 3-down role. And it kind of concerns me that, someone like Kyle Shanahan, who has been an RB whisperer throughout his, coaching career and just his family in general, concerns me that he was so willing to give away Breida during this offseason and just didn't even play him down the stretch of the 49ers Super Bowl run. So I am Howard over Breida, even though, Breida will probably have that slightly more fantasy-friendly pass game role. Moving on to the receivers. So mentioned before, big change kind of in this offense, other than the potential for Tua to take over, is Chan Gailey now being the OC. And this is really exciting for DeVante Parker because Chan Gailey just really knows how to feed a wide receiver 1. I mean, his last 6 wide receiver 1 seasons have consisted of Dwayne Bowe, Stevie Johnson, and Brandon Marshall. And every single time these guys got at least 128 targets, which is what Parker had last season. So that workload, what we saw from Parker, is pretty much his floor. And I mean, we're looking at 170 plus target ceiling potentially. I mean, that's what Brandon Marshall got with the Jets. That kind of everyone thought he was washed up, and Fitzmagic and Marshall kind of gave the Jets that real fun team back in 2015. I believe. So I know there's concern with Parker versus Preston Williams because with Preston Williams on the field last year, Parker was just a PPR wide receiver 36, was actually out-targeted by Preston. And then without Preston, Parker works as the PPR wide receiver 2 the rest of the way, 76 targets, 24 more than he had in the previous 8 games. But to me, it was just the manner in which Parker went about topping every other wide receiver than Michael Thomas. I mean, he put up 7 catches, 135 yards on Tre'Davious White, 5 catches, 111 yards on William Jackson. And the one everyone remembers, 8 catches and 137 yards on Stephon Gilmore. Look, Parker has always been this incredibly talented contested catch monster. He's hardly the first guy to thrive the second Adam Gase leaves. And we saw what he did when he finally had the opportunity to be the alpha wide receiver 1. What did the front office do? They gave him a contract extension, pretty much anointing him as the guy. And look at the offense. They didn't bring in any more wide receivers. They lost Albert Wilson and Allen Hurns to COVID opt-outs. So really, we're going to fade Parker, whose ADP is outside the top 20 wide receivers because of an undrafted wide receiver coming back from an ACL injury. I understand Williams is more talented than that. And, he put on some great film last year. Preston Williams is good too. But it's a situation where I think because Preston Williams is also a value, we're not paying enough attention to DeVante. I mean, we should be treating this like we do the Lions. I mean, no one's out here saying you shouldn't draft Kenny Golladay because of Marvin Jones. Usually they're both values. It's just a discount version of what we have in Detroit. It's a condensed passing game. Parker's going to be the 1. The bigger question is this going to be Preston or Gesicki as the number 2? And look, I mean, Williams was very good last year. And again, he outproduced Parker in those first 8 games, dismal 53% catch rate. Some of those games coincided with Josh Rosen being under center. That's, part of the reason why he was able to outproduce Parker. But I think the real question is Williams or Gesicki going to be the wide receiver 2? And no offense to Gesicki about being a tight end or wide receiver. He's a baller. He just plays wide receiver, even though he's listed as a tight end. I mean, 77% of Gesicki's snaps last season were in the slot or out wide. He made good use of it. Why shouldn't you put this guy out as a receiver? He's 6'6", 245 with, a sub 4.6 40-yard dash. I mean, he's got dominant contested catch ability. He is such a perfect fit for Fitzpatrick. We saw that last season. And now, I mean, I had concerns with the new offense because Changale, history with tight ends isn't great, but we're looking at a slot receiver here. So the concern was, what if we get a healthier version of Albert Wilson or Alan Hearns, continues to get run. But with those two guys out of the picture, I mean, Gesicki's only real competition for that slot role is Jakeem Grant, who's just such a pint-sized kind of speedster. I don't want to take anything away from him, J.J. Nelson, these real undersized wide receiver gadget type guys, but it's just very unlikely to me that we see someone like Jakeem Grant keep Gesicki off the field. The concern was just, will he get the snaps? I'm very confident Gesicki will be in those 3 wide receiver formations, souping up 75% snaps. Gesicki's the exact type of guy I want to bet on. I mean, last year in my best ball drafts, Gesicki was actually my highest owned player, regardless of position. And for those of you not playing best ball, I would encourage you all to check out Underdog Sports. You will love it. It is from the ex-founders of Draft, which was my favorite best ball platform from last year. Look, you have a shot to win $1 million in the Underdog tournament. Just make sure to enter the code PFF after you make your first deposit. You will get that chance to capture $1 million. And, Gesicki, a little higher price this year. I'm not sure if I can tell you that. I do not have the same exposure to Gesicki this year as I did last year. But, these Dolphins receivers, they're being priced closer to their floor. You look at Parker with that, low 20 ADP, even though he was the wide receiver 2 second half of last year. Preston Williams being in like the 40, 50 wide receiver range. I mean, if that guy can stay healthy, he's going to smash. So, wouldn't be going out on a limb too much for Gesicki, but, you're trying to take down that $1 million tournament, go get Parker, Williams, guys that are being priced much closer to their floor than their ceiling. So moving on to the ranks, I have these quarterbacks ranked outside of the top 30 currently. You have to do this in the rankings because we're projecting full season. And when you have a quarterback that isn't projected to play 16 games, it just becomes hard to put them, above 28 or so. I do lean Tyrod Taylor as the preferred streamer option, if him and Fitzpatrick are each, starting in week 1. I just think Tyrod's really enhanced rushing ability, with all due respect to Fitzmagic, still trying to run over all these dudes, even in his old age. Tyrod has the better start to the season, better rushing floor, and honestly better overall offense around him. So not against streaming Fitzpatrick, like I said, but I would just caution expectations, and Tua is probably going to be in there sooner rather than later, barring health. I have Jordan Howard as the RB 33, 1 spot behind J.K. Dobbins, 1 spot ahead of Tevin Coleman. Like I said, people, cheapest guy that we could realistically expect for 200-plus touches. I have him just ahead of, the Murray, Patterson, Madison, Pollard, Edmonds, tier of handcuffs. I just think, that type of role. Wow. Sometimes, we obsess over the targets. There's a lot to be said for getting all those touches. I have Matt Breida, RB 37, also ahead of Madison, Pollard, Edmonds. I do have him behind Latavius Murray. I think Latavius could still give you some semblance of, here and there standalone value in that Saints offense. He did get, double-digit touches in a few games that Alvin Kamara wasn't in last season. But just concerned about Breida, his, overall touches game to game. And also, if there was an injury to Howard, I'm not really convinced Breida would be anointed 3-down role in his range of outcomes, though. So I'm fine, taking stabs at him. 0 RB drafters should definitely be lining up to take shots at this Miami backfield. I have DeVante Parker as my wide receiver 20, 1 spot behind DJ Chark, 1 spot ahead of Stephon Diggs. It's this tier of wide receivers, like in this kind of 19 through 30 range, where they are their team's number 1 pass game option. They're talented guys. We just have questions. And, I'm putting Parker above the banged up vets like, your Hilton, your AJ Green, your Julian Edelman, even though he's healthy right now. I'm putting him behind DJ Chark, who I think is just, really coming on, and he's going to get that kind of YOLO ball role that Parker had last year from Gardner Minshew. Parker still could get that this year. I just think Chark, with the more friendly quarterback for him confirmed, outweighs Parker, who, again, we know what he can do with Fitzpatrick under center, but a little concerned about what happens with Tua there. Preston Williams, I have as my wide receiver 44, 1 spot behind Golden Tate, 1 spot ahead of Mike Williams. Go after both of these guys, people. Like, again, it's okay for one team to have multiple wide receivers that are fantasy values, particularly when they're being priced as cheap. Mike Gesicki, I have as my tight end, 11, one spot behind Noah Fant, one spot ahead of Jared Cook. And, even though he's not my most owned guy in best ball this year, still a guy I'm happy to leave fantasy drafts with. You got Kittle, Kelsey, Andrews at the top. But if you can't get one of those three, feel free to let your buddies overdraft, tight end 4 through 10, and then go ahead and take Fant, Gesicki, Jarwin, Herndon, any of these kind of rising youngsters that have the talent. Maybe they don't have the same, guaranteed target share, but definitely a scenario where these guys ball out in 2020. This takes us to the win total. Dolphins currently sitting at 6.5. Made a lot of improvements in their secondary, adding Byron Jones, Xavier Howard, using a first-round pick at the position. Another team that is seemingly, putting more emphasis on their cornerbacks over their pass rush. This is a study PFF has done over the last couple of years. And, while you prefer to have a great pass rush and a great secondary, if you had to pick one between the other, there is a lot of data that is indicating you would want to beef up the secondary. I am still going to go under 6.5. I think we see a similar situation as last year where this could be a very entertaining 5-11 or 6-10 team, but just still a lot of uncertainty under center in terms of if these guys can really win games. While they did add pieces to the offensive line, a lot of them were kind of underwhelming free agent signings, and, we'll see what we get from the rookies. Skill position talent is there, but, not adding a single RB or receiving talent to this group was a little puzzling to me. So I think the defense, while they probably won't be the worst in the league for most of the season, I'm not ready to anoint them as, a top 16 unit or anything like that in the offense. Still kind of worried about that offensive line, their ability to win games. So this has been the 2020 Miami Dolphins Fantasy Football Team Preview. Thank you all for listening. I'm Ian Hartitz, and until next time.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.